Welcome back, artists. So hopefully you watched the first video in this little review tutorial breaking down the skeleton. So this second part is actually going to be taking sort of some logical steps in breaking down the body in real time as we draw. Things to consider while you're trying to x-ray your cartoon character. So I'm going to try to do this digitally. Of course, you'll be doing this with pencil. So let me just remind you that we're working first with the silhouette, though, of course, and that's this outline. But of course, we still want to be mindful of, say, like where eyes are in certain things so that we can line sockets up or jaws. So I'm going to let this fade a bit so we can see through it. I'm not going to do the whole skeleton, but I'll try to break down some of the basics for you so you can see like what I'm keeping in mind as I draw. So first off, the best thing you can do is to start with the skull and then the spine and then branch out from there. And you always want to work from the back to the front. So you wouldn't start with, say, a rib cage, because then you'd have to try to somehow draw that backbone behind it, which can be tricky. Instead, start from the back, work to the front. Backbone first, rib cage in front of that. And you'll see it glimpsing through as you eclipse the bones in front. So first, let's start with that skull. Now, there's not a lot of meat in there if you're looking at an x-ray of, say, a human being. And if you're looking at the skeleton of an anteater, which I'm going to absolutely be doing, I'm going to look like an anteater skull to do this. I'm going to try to draw this as best I can based off of those references. Now, this might look like cartilage, but in fact, there is a lot of bone here based off my research. So I'm going to create that large shape, create an eye socket, which will be a little larger than the eyeballs, because of course we only see about 30% of a socket. Of an eyeball. The rest, like the 70%, is that sphere tucked into the skull. So notice here, though, I've also got a waistcoat that shows the buttons, not quite at the very edge of the body. And that's important because it means that unlike the skull, the body isn't in perfect profile. So maybe the skull isn't exactly in perfect profile either. We're not seeing the other eye, but it must be turned a little more because we're seeing both legs as opposed to one eclipsing the other. We're seeing the groin. We're seeing that waistcoat with a little width to the right of those buttons. So I actually probably would see a slightly turned skull. So I'm going to put the eye socket, just a hint of it right here, even though we don't see the eyes. And the skull, the ear, of course, being cartilage, and next the spine. So let's just keep it simple right now. It's not going to be perfectly down the middle of the body, right, like this, but not perfectly like butt right up against the leftmost part of the silhouette. Probably going to be the leftmost third. And it's going to sweep down to meet the pelvis. Now, the pelvis is essentially a bowl that holds all your organs in place right there, your lower intestine. So we're going to create a pelvis that kind of does go pretty close to the edge. Not all the way. We want a little space here because, of course, if you fall on your bum, there's some meat to hinder that fall. Okay? And we don't want our pelvis to look flat. It's more of a bowl, so part of it's facing us. Right? So this is kind of the shape. Now, this is going to get a lot more accurate when I go back in and try to refine it. But this looks about right. Probably a good placement for our backbone. Now, I can start like this to hint at shapes, but I'm not going to keep it like this. The last thing I want to do is to create generic dog biscuit treats when, say, an actual bone is anything but that simple. And I certainly don't want to just have little squares for the backbones. But here's a decent start. Check out the next video.